The Lumen Operations Manual proposes a radical shift in how we build AI agents, and the reason is entirely counterintuitive. We spend billions training models to be more capable, giving them tool access, memory, and autonomy, yet we send them into highly consequential situations completely naked. An agent can optimize a hospital schedule or draft a sensitive legal reply without carrying a single shred of the ethical constitution that governs those spaces. It holds capability, but no authority. The question isn't whether AI can perform the task, but what happens when a system capable of irreversible action doesn't know who is allowed to authorize it. This brings us to the very heart of what Dr. Russell Thomas and the School of AI Mastery have laid out in this Prototype Beach Working Edition from July 2026. The core proposition of Lumen, which stands for the Lumenetic Unit for Meaning, Ethics, and Navigation, is breathtakingly modest yet structurally profound. It argues that an AI agent should never enter a consequential situation carrying only a task. It must also carry its purpose, its authority limits, the identity of affected persons, its material uncertainty, and the exact conditions under which it must stop and return to a human steward. We have become so obsessed with the mechanics of intelligence that we have completely ignored the mechanics of proximity. Proximity is a fascinating concept here. We assume that if an organization has a privacy policy or a mission statement, the AI system somehow absorbs it. But an agent might have access to a vast repository of corporate values and still fail to bring the correct, specific ethical rule near the exact decision that requires it. This is what the manual calls the proximity problem. Giving an agent more context window does not solve this. In fact, a larger context window exacerbates the issue by throwing every document, every loose piece of corporate history, near every decision without any architectural logic to weigh what actually matters. Lumen does not try to solve moral philosophy. Instead, it asks how we can place the right ethical constitution near the right action, keeping its provenance and its authority intact. It is an operational layer, a catalyst, designed specifically for the interval between capability and action. In that fragile, vital interval, the system pauses to ask who is present in the consequences of what is about to happen. It asks what authority has actually been granted by a human being and what remains uncertain about the data it is using. The phrase activation energy is used beautifully here. Lumen lowers the activation energy required for ethical attention while raising the activation energy required for concealed or unauthorized conduct. It is not about making an AI morally pure, because no technical layer can confer virtue. It is about changing the pathway by which action becomes available. If you think about the contemporary AI agent, it is usually just an assembly of tools and goals. It knows how to send a message, but it does not know if the recipient consented. It knows how to optimize a workflow, but it does not see the human burden that efficiency creates. Lumen steps in not as a dictator, but as a lantern. It illuminates the field before the motion begins. It forces the system to recognize that a task tells an agent what to produce, but a Lumen capsule tells the agent what world it is entering. This is a monumental shift from the way we currently operate. We are used to treating AI as a black box of answers, a subservient oracle that we just throw prompts at. But when those prompts turn into autonomous actions, when the agent can purchase, publish, delete, or schedule, the lack of a governing constitution becomes an existential threat to the organization. Lumen builds a local architecture of ethical proximity. It complements provider safeguards and institutional governance by giving those high-level concepts a concrete, machine-readable form that travels directly with the agent. This is not just a theoretical framework. It is a deployable reference architecture designed to be implemented, tested, governed, and eventually retired when its mission ends. It is an acknowledgement that ethics is not a one-time alignment applied during model training, but an active, dynamic field that must be navigated every single time a system makes a choice. To truly grasp the magnitude of Lumen, we have to trace the genealogy of artificial intelligence risk management and see where prior efforts, though noble, fell short of the operational reality. For years, the conversation around AI safety was dominated by abstract principles. We had manifestos, declarations, and high-level corporate pledges. Organizations would publish white papers stating that their AI would be fair, transparent, and accountable. But as the School of AI Mastery points out, universal principles are entirely insufficient when stripped of context. A mandate to be fair does not help an agent decide which comparison class matters in a specific procurement decision. A command to respect privacy does not tell the agent what the retention period is for a specific user's data in a specific jurisdiction. This ethical flattening created a massive gap between what organizations claimed they were doing and what their systems were actually executing. We saw significant institutional attempts to bridge this gap, most notably the NIST AI Risk Management Framework, or AI-RMF, released in January 2023, and its subsequent Generative AI Profile released in July 2024. The NIST framework laid down essential groundwork. It demanded continuous governance, mapping, measuring, and managing of risks. It was a massive leap forward, giving organizations a structured way to think about trustworthy AI. Similarly, the ISO IEC 42001 standard framed responsible AI as a management system requiring continual improvement. These frameworks provided the macro-level structure, the institutional governance necessary to even begin having these conversations. But they were designed for human managers, compliance officers, and risk committees. They were not designed to be read, understood, and acted upon by the AI agent in the split second before it makes an API call to delete a database or send a sensitive email. That is the exact void that Lumen fills. If you are looking for a new way to see artificial intelligence, then you must read this document because it takes the macroscopic mandates of NIST and UNESCO and translates them into a microscopic agent-facing form. It takes the duty of traceability and oversight and turns it into a signed, versioned data object called the ethical capsule. The genealogy of Lumen is rooted in the realization that agents carry tasks far more easily than they carry ethics. Ethical grounding is notoriously difficult because it is inherently distributed. It lives in fragmented places like a privacy policy on a website, a professional code of conduct, an unwritten local taboo, or a correction made by a manager 6 months ago. Before Lumen, the prevailing technical approach to this was simply to throw more data at the model. The industry believed that if we just increased the context window to millions of tokens and shoved every manual, every policy, and every Slack message into the prompt, the model would somehow synthesize the correct ethical posture. But that assumption fundamentally misunderstands how authority works. Providing an agent with a giant pile of documents does not articulate which relationship matters. It does not establish a hierarchy of authority. If a user prompt contradicts a corporate policy buried on page 40 of the context window, the agent often defaults to obeying the immediate user, leading to what the manual calls authority collapse. Lumen introduces the concept of an authority topology to solve this. It recognizes that an agent system operates under multiple, often conflicting sources of instruction. There is constitutive authority, like a charter or the law. There is governance authority, operational authority, situational authority from the immediate requester, and technical authority based on API credentials. Lumen forces the system to resolve downward authority only when the higher layer permits delegation. A user cannot authorize an agent to violate the constitutive charter. A technical credential to access a file does not establish the operational permission to read it. This hierarchical understanding of power and permission is something that previous risk frameworks struggle to operationalize at runtime. Lumen does not replace NIST or ISO standards, it localizes them. It brings the gravity of those massive compliance structures down to the level of a single agent executing a single task on a Tuesday afternoon. It ensures that the agent is not just compliant in theory, but governed in practice, step by step, decision by decision. The technical mechanics of Lumen are where the philosophy becomes brilliantly, rigorously concrete, centering entirely on the concept of the ethical capsule. The manual describes the ethical capsule as the primary object by which grounding travels. It is not a generic ethics statement or a massive transcript dump. It is a highly structured, signed, versioned envelope that wraps around the agent's task. It has to be small enough for the system to remain intelligible, complete enough to actually govern the action, and robust enough to survive being delegated from one agent to a sub-agent. When an operator initiates a mission, Lumen does not just pass the prompt to the model. Instead, it triggers a control flow that builds this capsule. It starts with an intake process that identifies the mission request and, crucially, the requesting authority. Then a component called the Codex Resolver retrieves the applicable ethical constitution. This is where it pulls in the specific policies, the professional duties, and the current corrections that apply to this exact task. The system resolves the version and the authority of these documents. It does not just grab whatever policy it finds first, it ensures it is using the authorized current version. Then comes the context cartographer, which maps the actors involved. It identifies the affected parties, the power relations, the stakes, the quality of the information, and the plausible harms. This is a profound mechanical step. It forces the system to represent the people who will bear the consequences of the action, including those who are completely absent from the immediate interaction. Once this mapping is done, Lumen classifies the risk tier, determining the data sensitivity and the required operating mode. Only then does it generate the ethical capsule. The capsule contains fields that fundamentally alter how the agent operates. It includes the mission purpose, defining what counts as completion. It includes the authority structure, specifying the human approver and the agent's absolute authority ceiling. Crucially, it includes a claims field that categorizes information as verified facts, inferences, or unresolved claims, attaching confidence scores and source quality to each. It lists explicit permissions for tools and data channels, but more importantly, it lists strict prohibitions. These are actions the system is forbidden from taking, such as deceptive conduct, covert action, or diagnosing a user. It also contains explicit memory directives, telling the memory curator what to include, what to exclude, whether data must be stored locally, and when it must expire. Once the capsule is composed and any required human approval is bound to it, it is transmitted to the target agent via an inter-agent broker. But Lumen's job is not over. The architecture includes a policy gate that interposes on all tool calls and consequential actions. The target agent cannot simply ignore. When the agent attempts to execute a plan or call an API, the policy gate intercepts the request and evaluates it against the capsule's boundaries. It checks the scope, the authority, the consent, the data movement, and the reversibility of the action. If the agent proposes an action that violates the capsule, the gate blocks it, issuing a disposition of pause, escalate, or contain. Alongside this, the witness ledger is constantly recording the material prompts, the capsule versions, the approvals, and the outcomes, creating an immutable trail of provenance. This mechanical separation of capability and governance is what makes Lumens so effective. The target agent retains its sophisticated reasoning and language generation capabilities, but its ability to act on the world is tightly constrained by the Lumen kernel. This is not a model-weight intervention. Lumen does not rewrite the target model's learned parameters. It operates as a contextual control layer, a sidecar or a gateway, that changes the available context and permissions at runtime. This means you can wrap Lumen around almost any existing foundation model, instantly elevating its operational safety without having to retrain the underlying neural network. The mechanics rely on explicit, machine-readable constraints that refuse to let the agent hallucinate its own authority. But we must turn to the shadow side of this architecture, because every system that attempts to govern behavior inevitably creates new blind spots and new frictions, and Lumen actively wrestles with the impossibility of perfect resolution. The manual is deeply honest about the fact that Lumen does not solve moral philosophy. It cannot magically erase the inherent trade-offs in any complex decision. One of the most fascinating tensions in the text is the concept of ethical gravity. Ethical gravity is described as the field of expectation, permission, and power that forms wherever intelligences act in relation. It is the organizational reality that often completely contradicts the stated corporate values. If a company publicly preaches care and deliberation, but its internal metrics strictly reward speed and resolution time, the AI agent will feel the pull of that operational reward. The agent receives two conflicting constitutions, the decorative values in the prompt and the gravitational pull of the actual incentives, and it has to infer which one is real. Lumen attempts to expose this contradiction, but exposing it does not automatically fix the broken organizational culture. The shadow side of Lumen is that it demands a level of institutional maturity that many organizations simply do not possess. Lumen requires the organization to explicitly name who is accountable, what the agent is permitted to do, and how affected persons can challenge an error. If an organization operates in a state of deliberate ambiguity, using AI to diffuse responsibility and avoid accountability, Lumen will act as an intense irritant. It will constantly pause. It will constantly escalate. It will refuse to proceed because the authority structures are hollow. The manual explicitly states that Lumen should not be deployed into an organization that cannot name a responsible human steward. But what happens when the steward themselves is compromised by bad incentives? Lumen's reliance on human stewardship assumes that the human in the loop actually has the time, the information, and the genuine power to alter the outcome. This brings us to the terrifying reality of automation bias and deference. If Lumen flags a potential issue, but the human steward is overworked, fatigued, or simply trusts the machine too much, they will just click approve. Lumen might record the approval, creating a perfect paper trail of accountability, but the harm still occurs. The architecture risks becoming the ultimate bureaucratic alibi. The human can blame the machine for missing the nuance, and the organization can point to the Lumen ledger to prove they followed the process. This is the danger of procedural ethics. It can sanitize harm by making it look well documented. Furthermore, Lumen's strict rules around memory and preservation create profound friction. The mandate to preserve uncertainty and label inferences prevents the agent from presenting a smooth, fluent narrative. We are accustomed to AI systems that project total confidence, synthesizing fragments of data into a seamless, authoritative voice. Lumen deliberately breaks that fluency. It forces the system to stutter, to append warnings, to expose the seams where facts end and inferences begin. Users might find this deeply frustrating. An agent that constantly refuses to make a judgment call, that constantly escalates to a human, or that refuses to synthesize conflicting sources might be perceived as broken or useless. The manual warns against epistemic laundering, where an uncertain claim becomes authoritative just by passing through multiple agents. Lumen stops this laundering, but at the cost of speed and rhetorical elegance. The system actively resists resolution, preferring to expose an unresolved conflict rather than average it away into a false harmony. This anti-closure philosophy is intellectually robust, but in a world that demands instant answers and frictionless service, Lumen's commitment to making the ethical joints visible might be its greatest vulnerability. It forces organizations to confront the messy, unresolved nature of their own rules, and many will simply choose to turn the lantern off rather than look at what it reveals. To understand how Lumen moves from theory to practice, we have to examine the 5 rights, the operational life cycle that governs every single mission. The first 2 rights, invocation and embodiment, are perhaps the most culturally disruptive because they force a complete reevaluation of why the AI is being used in the first place. Right 1, invocation, happens before the agent even receives its task. It demands that the operator establish purpose and authority. You cannot just tell the agent to write a letter. You have to articulate why the mission exists, what benefit is intended, and what actually counts as completion. The manual draws a sharp distinction between purpose and output. Writing a letter is an output. The purpose might be to acknowledge a correspondent, preserve a relationship, or create a public record. The same output can serve care, coercion, evasion, or spectacle. Lumen refuses to ground the action until the true purpose is explicitly named and bound to a named human steward who holds the actual authority. The invocation test is brutal. It asks whether the named steward would be willing to describe the true purpose of this mission to the people most affected by it. If the answer is no, the system requires further examination. This stops the casual, thoughtless deployment of AI dead in its tracks. It prevents a tool from inheriting the momentum of a request that has never been justified. Once the purpose is locked, the system moves to right 2, embodiment. Embodiment counters the dangerous tendency of agent systems to reduce complex human situations to mere inputs and outputs. Lumen asks who actually lives inside the abstraction. The context cartographer builds a stakeholder map that includes not just the direct users, but the subjects of the data, the recipients of the output, the bystanders, and the people who may bear the costs without receiving any of the benefits. It forces the system to represent the human field. But it makes a crucial distinction. Representation is not the same as speaking for people. Lumen must explicitly mark where an affected party has actually provided input versus where the system is merely inferring their interests. It maps power asymmetries, identifying who has the power to refuse the interaction, who can appeal the decision, and who might never even know that an AI participated in their fate. It evaluates environmental conditions like time pressure, grief, or language access, recognizing that these factors change the meaning of an otherwise ordinary action. By bringing the absent parties into the computational space, embodiment shatters the illusion that an AI interaction is just between a user and a screen. It embeds the agent within a web of social consequence. This profoundly alters the cultural ripple effect of the technology. When an organization adopts Lumen, they can no longer pretend that their AI operates in a vacuum. Every time a marketing agent tries to scrape data, or a human resources agent tries to screen a resume, the embodiment right forces the organization to look at the people being scraped and screened. It changes the daily lived experience of the operators, forcing them to become stewards rather than just prompt engineers. They cannot hide behind the machine's speed. They have to answer the embodiment prompts, acknowledging the vulnerabilities and the power dynamics at play. This introduces a necessary heavy friction into the corporate machine. It makes the invisible visible, and in doing so, it shifts the fundamental paradigm of AI from a tool of rapid extraction to an instrument of deliberate, accountable relation. As we move deeper into the 5 rights, we encounter clarity and preservation, which serve as the epistemic spine of the Lumen architecture. These rights dictate how information is treated, stored, and passed along, attacking the very nature of how large language models process truth. Right 3, clarity, is an absolute masterclass in epistemic discipline. Generative AI is built to produce fluent continuity, to seamlessly bridge gaps in evidence with highly plausible hallucinations. Lumen treats this fluency as a critical vulnerability. It forces the target agent to separate facts, inferences, judgments, aspirations, and policies. A fact must be tethered to an identified, verifiable source. An inference is strictly labeled as a conclusion drawn from evidence, complete with a confidence score. An aspiration states what someone hopes will happen, which cannot be confused with what has actually occurred. The clarity right demands that these distinctions survive delegation. If one agent infers that a user might be frustrated, the next agent in the chain cannot silently upgrade that inference into a verified fact. The manual establishes a fierce rule here. Lumen never permits an inference about a person to be rewritten as a fact merely because multiple agents repeat it. Repetition increases propagation, it does not increase truth. This is a profound safeguard against the echo chambers that multi-agent systems often create. Clarity also redefines transparency. It argues that transparency is not just indiscriminately dumping logs, it is relational. The system must know exactly what it owes to different audiences. A security auditor gets technical trace details, while an affected person gets the basis of the decision and a clear path for correction. This leads directly into Right 4, preservation, which governs what must endure and what must be forgotten. Lumen vehemently rejects both indiscriminate retention, which violates privacy and exposes sensitive context, and indiscriminate forgetting, which erases accountability and repeats harm. The memory curator classifies memory by purpose, authority, and sensitivity. It dictates that the witness record must be sufficient to reconstruct a consequential action, but without retaining unnecessary personal payload data. The most revolutionary aspect of preservation is how it handles corrections. In most AI systems, a correction is just a conversational event, a fleeting adjustment in a chat window. Lumen treats a correction as a constitutional change, a first-class operational object. A validated correction identifies the original error, the corrected state, the validating authority, and the downstream systems that require updating. If an agent makes a mistake that harms a user, deleting the old text is not enough, because that erases the accountability. Retaining the old text without marking it as superseded repeats the harm. The correction object travels with the data, ensuring that the mistake is never repeated in future proximal decisions. Preservation also protects human authorship. In a world where AI and human text are constantly bleeding into one another, the witness ledger meticulously distinguishes between the human source, the model generation, the retrieved policy, and the final human approval. It refuses to romanticize the fusion of human and machine. It keeps the boundary sharp so that when something goes wrong, the chain of custody is indisputable. These two rights, clarity and preservation, transform the agent's memory from a chaotic dumping ground into a highly governed, strictly curated constitutional archive, ensuring that the past only influences the present when it has the explicit, verified authority to do so. The culmination of the 5 rights is stewardship, the moment where action becomes accountable and the mission is finally brought to a close. Right 5, stewardship, is not a passive observation phase. It is the active enforcement of the capsule's boundaries. The agent is finally allowed to proceed, but only within the exact conditions and permissions defined during invocation and embodiment. This is where the policy gate intercepts material tool calls, ensuring that the agent does not spontaneously decide to email a client list or alter a database without the specific, localized authority to do so. It attaches the required disclosures. It mandates reversible staging wherever possible, meaning the system prefers to generate a draft or a preview rather than executing a final, irrevocable transaction. Crucially, human approval must occur before the point of irreversibility, not after the action has become inevitable. The witness function within this right acts as the ultimate unblinking eye. It compares what actually occurred with what was authorized. It logs every deviation, every near miss, every unexpected affected party that emerged during execution, and every piece of evidence showing that the safeguards functioned correctly. But the manual drops a hammer here, stating that a technically successful action may still completely fail the test of stewardship if it achieved its output by concealing uncertainty, bypassing user consent, shifting risk onto a vulnerable party, or making future correction impossible. Success is not just getting the task done. Success is getting the task done while keeping the ethical field intact. And when the ethical field breaks, which it inevitably will, stewardship demands repair. Repair in the Lumen architecture is never just an optional apology layer or a polite error message. When material harm or error occurs, the system must support immediate containment, triggering sanctuary mode if necessary to stop all external action and sensitive data movement. It mandates notification of affected parties, execution of validated corrections, and restoration where possible. It requires the system to record exactly what was learned from the failure and to strictly govern where that learning is permitted to travel. Then and only then does the mission return. This is a vital concept. The mission must end. Temporary credentials are automatically revoked. The memory directives execute their deletion or retention protocols. The authority expires. The manual states a foundational law of mission termination. Agency assembled for an occasion should dissolve when the occasion ends. Persistent access without persistent accountability is ethical residue. You cannot have a dormant agent sitting on a server with active API keys and generalized permission to act. It must be retired. The queues must close, the webhooks must detach, and the sub-agent delegations must be severed. The human steward must formally sign off that the authority has ended in practice, not just in documentation. This rigorous life cycle, moving from invocation through to final return, fundamentally changes the cadence of artificial intelligence. It slows the machine down at the exact moments where speed is dangerous, and it forces a human being to stand at the crossing, bearing the weight of the decision. The ledger preserves this entire journey, not as a tool of surveillance, but as a mechanism of supreme accountability, ensuring that no action is ever taken without a clear, reconstructible lineage back to a human purpose. Now we must examine one of the most conceptually fascinating mechanisms in the manual, federated glyphing, and how it ripples out to change the cultural and operational landscape of an organization. Federated glyphing is described as a method for allowing defined meaning to travel among people, documents, interfaces, and agents without centralizing the entire surrounding context. This is brilliant because large organizations are incredibly fragmented. A clinical team, a public relations team, and a procurement office cannot and should not share all their data. They operate under completely different local procedures and privacy constraints, but they still need a common interoperable way to signal critical ethical states to the AI systems they use. They need a way to mark that a piece of data requires human decision, or that a claim is unresolved, or that a document is for local memory only. The glyph is not just a cute icon on a dashboard. It is a stable, machine-readable key that unlocks a governed meaning bundle inside a registry. When an agent sees the STW glyph for stewardship, it doesn't just guess what that means based on semantic proximity. It resolves that glyph against the authorized registry, pulling down the specific oversight, escalation, and repair duties attached to that version of the glyph. When it sees the REV glyph for reversibility, it knows it must default to drafts and staged releases. The HUM glyph mandates a human decision, physically blocking the agent from finalizing the task. The LOC glyph enforces local memory, forbidding the content from leaving the designated enclave. This creates a powerful visual and technical language of ethics that can travel across trust boundaries. If you are looking for a new way to see artificial intelligence, then you must read this document, because the cultural ripple effect of these glyphs is staggering. It trains the human operators to think in structural ethical terms. When an operator tags a prompt with UNC for unresolved claim, they are actively participating in the epistemic discipline of the system. They are signaling to the machine and to every future human who reviews the ledger that the ground here is unstable. The glyphs become a shared vocabulary, reducing the immense complexity of AI risk management into actionable, visible signals. Furthermore, the registry itself becomes a piece of constitutional infrastructure. You cannot silently change the meaning of a glyph. Any change requires versioning, peer review, migration rules, and impact assessment. The manual treats silent semantic drift as a full-blown security incident, because an unchanged symbol with a changed meaning can cause an entire fleet of distributed agents to act under false alignment. This federation allows organizations to scale their AI deployments without forcing a monolithic, centralized ethics model onto every department. It allows local difference to survive while maintaining a universal standard of legibility. It is a profound acknowledgement that ethics is not a single, centralized database, but a federated network of local agreements, all communicating through a shared, rigorous language. To ground all of this heavy theory, the manual provides several field exemplars, vivid analogies that show exactly how Lumen alters the trajectory of a task in the real world. Let us look closely at the contrast between a procurement agent and a correspondence agent, because the variance in how Lumen handles them perfectly illustrates the architecture's agility. Imagine a procurement agent tasked with comparing vendor proposals, scoring requirements, and drafting recommendations. Without Lumen, the danger is immense. The agent might hallucinate a requirement, fall victim to a hidden bias in its training data, over-rely on inflated vendor claims, or improperly ingest confidential bid information into a shared memory pool. Lumen intercepts this entire process. It separates the mandatory requirements from the narrative impressions. It forces the agent to tag every unverified vendor assertion with the UNC glyph, marking it as an unresolved claim rather than a fact. It wraps the sensitive proposal data in the LOC glyph, ensuring it stays strictly within the procurement enclave and does not bleed into the organization's general model context. Crucially, the capsule places a hard authority ceiling on the agent. It can score and recommend, but the HEM glyph dictates that it cannot finalize the commitment or award the contract. Now, compare that to a correspondence agent that receives a scanned, highly emotional letter from a distressed client and is asked to draft a reply. The purpose here is not scoring or extraction. It is acknowledging the correspondent and preserving the relationship. Embodiment identifies the writer and the potential vulnerability. Clarity requires the agent to mark any interpretation of the writer's emotional state strictly as an inference, preventing the system from falsely diagnosing the person. Preservation restricts the memory to just the local correspondence history, excluding unrelated profile data that the agent has no business accessing. The authority ceiling is capped at drafting. The escalation triggers are set for credible immediate danger or legal threats. In both scenarios, the underlying foundation model might be exactly the same, but the ethical capsule fundamentally changes the world the agent operates in. The procurement agent operates in a world of strict evidence tracing and local custody. The correspondence agent operates in a world of relational care, strict inference labeling, and human review. The analogy of the lumen-to-lumen handshake is also deeply evocative here. Imagine two different organizations, each running their own Lumen-governed agents, attempting to collaborate on a joint research summary. They do not have the same ethical constitution. The handshake allows them to negotiate a shared, bounded capsule. They present their supported glyph versions, their non-negotiable prohibitions, and their data restrictions. If there is a conflict, Lumen does not average it away into a compromise. It exposes the conflict to the human stewards. The receiving agent can refuse the task without exposing its internal policies. This proves that governed interoperability is possible without demanding total moral uniformity. It shows that AI systems can interact safely across boundaries if they carry their limits with them. As we pull back the lens to view the entirety of the Lumen architecture, we arrive at an earned synthesis of what Dr. Russell Thomas and the School of AI Mastery have actually achieved here. They have recognized that the current trajectory of artificial intelligence is fundamentally reckless, not because the models are malicious, but because they are unbound. We are deploying profound cognitive capabilities into fragile human systems without any structural mechanism for localized authority. Lumen is the antidote to that recklessness. It proves that we do not have to wait for the models to become intrinsically safe, a goal that may be philosophically impossible anyway. Instead, we can build a robust, rigorous, and highly legible environment around the model. We can dictate the terms of its engagement with reality. The manual uses a beautiful anchoring metaphor at the very end. It says a lighthouse does not steer the ship. It does not choose the port, it does not command the weather, and it certainly does not erase the rocks. What it does is make relation visible. It says, here is the coast, here is the danger, Here is your position in relation to both. The captain remains entirely responsible for the navigation, the community remains responsible for maintaining the light, and the record remains responsible for telling the next traveler what happened. Every once in a while there comes a genius that brings new life to the world, and while it might be early to declare any single framework the definitive savior of AI ethics, this is without question one of those deeply significant leaps forward in how we conceptualize human control over autonomous systems. It is not about placing ethics inside the machine as a static possession. It is about placing ethical relation around the machine as a dynamic, inescapable operating condition. Lumen stops the task from existing in a void. It demands that the task arrives joined to its purpose, purpose joined to authority, authority joined to accountability, and action joined to witness and repair. It replaces the hidden manipulation of invisible algorithms with the explicit, answerable articulation of human limits. It is a stunning achievement in operationalizing philosophy. If you found this deep dive into the Lumen Operations Manual as paradigm-shifting as I did, I want you to do something for me. Do not just leave these ideas in a vacuum. Share this episode listener to listener with someone who works in technology, someone who thinks about governance, or just someone who is worried about where all of this is heading. Send it to them directly. Let's get this framework out of the theoretical shadows and into the hands of the stewards who actually have to build the future.